Welcome to Joy, Love, and Abundance, designed to lift up and explore the people, organizations, and experiences that create a more joyful, loving, and abundant world. Join hosts Rodney Eric Lopez, Patrice Tanaka, and Cyrus Webb as they share stories and insights that will inform and inspire you. Enjoy today's broadcast.
And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Joy, Love, and Abundance, both for our radio audience and us tuning in online. I'm Cyrus Webb, joined by my great friends Patrice Tanaka and Rodney Eric Lopez. Patrice, Rodney, how are the two of you?
Pretty good.
Doing
Can't
well.
complain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that Ida has passed.
Look, it is great to be back. It's great to be dry here in Mississippi. We've been having, once again, a challenging season, as a lot of people have. Patrice, I know you and I were just talking before we went on. You were talking about that you've been pretty good since the remnants of Hurricane Ida headed your way, but you have been hearing about people who had some damage, right?
Yeah, it was for I'm in Manhattan, and I live in a high rise on the 26th floor. So all I experienced was a lot of rain all night Wednesday. And then the next morning, of course, I read about the subways being underwater and buses floating down the street and cars being submerged and people's basements being flooded and people actually dying. I mean, so, yeah, we took quite a bit of rain as a result of Hurricane Ida. And it wasn't that long ago that we had Tropical Storm Henri, just a week and a half before. So, yeah, there's been a lot of weather action in our area. And I don't know about you, Rodney, up in Providence, but pretty wet here.
Thankfully, in our little corner of the world, we, like you and like many other people in the northeastern United States, we experienced a lot of rain, a lot of wind, a lot of downed trees. But thankfully, where we are, there wasn't a lot of damage or loss of power or anything. However, I did get, pictures from my friends who live in my old neighborhood in New York City, in the Bronx, and I was very surprised to see the flooding. There's one of the highways that cuts through the Bronx called the Major Deegan Expressway, and it was absolutely flooded. I mean, cars almost entirely submerged, and you're just not used to seeing that. At least I'm not used to seeing that in big cities like New York.
Right.
And when you see that, you realize that that weather and infrastructure issues really are not just they're not just things that we hear about in the in the South or in rural areas. Really, anybody can be impacted with a storm that's long enough and that's determined enough can really just stop movement for anybody. And so it was a really humbling experience to see that yet another storm can cause this kind of disruption and damage. It was telling. It really was.
Yeah. Rodney, you brought up an interesting point, and it kind of goes to the topic that we're kicking out the show with today, because and I know Patrice is going to talk later on about a personal connection to what's happening in Afghanistan. I think, since the last time we were on the air, so much has happened here in Mississippi where I live and where our radio audience is. Of course, it was 16 years to the date, literally, when Hurricane Ida touched down, that it was Hurricane Katrina we dealt with 16 years ago. So there was a lot of angst, in our area. They were predicting, the damage, the flooding. Of course, Louisiana still got, I think I saw today now that, people are starting to just get their lights on almost a week later. So, people are still reeling from that there. In my area, we thankfully we missed the brunt that they thought we were going to get. It actually went around us. So we still got the wind and rain, but not the damage, which was thankful. But as you mentioned, Rodney, a really good point that things are happening that people wouldn't expect, where they would expect it. And it kind of is like about life, right? We all are weathering some type of storm in our lives. And I thought about, how we could keep our joy even in that. I mean, I naturally think about my family when we're dealing with a storm or anything catastrophic like that, or could be, about making sure they're okay and they have what they need. And I think that can bring up so much anxiety. And I was thinking for myself, what helps me to kind of keep my joy in that time, and it really is realizing what you can do and letting go of the rest is what I've kind of learned to do. Is you prepare, you do what you can, but then you don't worry about things that you cannot control. And I think for myself that has served me well from being overly anxious, but also still keeping some peace and being able to be attentive. Not just to what I'm dealing with, but knowing, as you all were just talking about. I mean, I think about the dozens of people lost their lives. I saw one story in Louisiana. These twins were swept out of their parents' arms and drowned. And I mean, just these horrible stories. And you think, it could always be so much worse, right? So being able to appreciate that. So Patrice, I'm curious for you. I mean, we all have dealt with some type of storm in our life. What has kind of helped you to keep your joy in that, in the face of that?
Well, I guess just the idea that this too shall pass. Wednesday it was storming. Thursday it was blue skies again, and cleanup work was starting, throughout the tri-state area. I mean, I guess I know that life goes on. We go on. We just have to stay focused on, what we can do to support one another during these, to help weather the storm, and know that, this too shall pass. I think I've arrived at the place that you have, Cyrus, where I'm not going to worry about things that are outside my control. I'm going to focus on the things that I can control and help to make an impact on, rather than, get ahead of myself. In my agency, we often used to use the phrase, let's jump off that bridge when we get there, just to remind ourselves to let's stay focused on the problem at hand and not get too far ahead of ourselves where we're not really dealing with something concrete yet. We're just worrying about, what might happen. Let's just stay focused on today and deal with what today's problem is, because what we do is going to create a better or a worse future for tomorrow, given the way we handle today's problem.
So true. Rodney, what about for you? I mean, as you mentioned, even knowing people, loved ones who experience a literal storm, but I mean, what has kind of helped you when dealing with the storms of life to be able to keep your joy?
I think it's a wonderful question. I think it's a wonderful metaphor for life, storms and weathering storms. When I think about weathering storms, literal storms, right, I think about people who have either lost their homes, people, like you said, maybe they've lost loved ones, maybe they've lost property, maybe a car. You see a car floating down the street, or your home has been flooded and you've lost lots of, material things. I think it's important to grieve those things, like to take a moment to understand that maybe in some important ways, life may not be the same again, and it's important to not push past that feeling, to be present to it, to own it, to understand that maybe there is a condition that you had before the storm that is changed, and temporarily it may feel like it's for the worse, and for a moment it may be, and that it's fine and it's human to grieve that loss, whatever it may be. I think about the time when I went to the ATM. It's part of the story that I tell about my work around abundance and abundance mindset. This idea that I was at one of the lowest points of my life when I went to the ATM and found that there was no money in the account because the account had been seized. by the government, and realized that I was very much living a hand-to-mouth existence. And that was a storm in my life, and I had to grieve the fact that, I lost what I thought my lifestyle was at that point. And like Patrice said, all you can do at that point after you've grieved that is do one thing each day to make your life a little bit better. And understand that you can't do it all in one day. You can't turn around a condition, 180 degrees in one day. But is there one small thing you can do to rebuild, to put that home back together, to put that life back together, but to take the appropriate amount of time to grieve and mourn, and then to move on? And I think that sometimes that's easier said than done, but we all do it, and we all go through it in our own time. And then the sunny day comes, and then the blue sky does come back.
Yeah, I love that. I want to say for those who are just tuning in, either on the radio side or online, you're listening to Joy, Love, and Abundance. You just heard there from Rodney Eric Lopez. Also, Patrice Tanaka's with us. I'm Cyrus Webb. We were just talking about, of course, what's been happening in the United States with the storms, especially with Hurricane Ida, but also the metaphor that Rodney was mentioning about life, the storms of life, and how we can be able to keep our joy in the interim. And we'd love to hear from you all, no matter what platform you're joining us on. Let us know in the comment section how you've been able to keep your joy, what helps you to be able to do that. One of the things that I do want to bring up also, then we're going to transition into kind of the story that kind of got our attention this week, that I loved, and Patrice, I'm sure this is something that you enjoyed seeing too, is how people were rushing to help. And I think it goes to the story that you're going to be sharing as well, even in Afghanistan. But I love the fact that, after, the aftermath here in Mississippi, in Louisiana, even up north, how people were coming in to be of assistance. And I think that says so much about the human spirit. And also it kind of flies in the face of what we hear so much, is that everyone is selfish. They only think about themselves. How has that inspired you, Rodney? I'm curious to know that, even as you talked about the low points in your own life, that there are always going to be people in your life in some form or fashion who are willing to offer a helping hand.
Well, I think that's the key, is that we don't have to go through anything alone. And I think if we have that mindset that I'm all alone in this, that just adds to whatever pain or sadness or discomfort that we have. But if we know that there's someone we can reach out to, a colleague, a coworker, a friend, a family member, even a therapist, right? We've talked about that in some of our other shows, right? The importance of reaching out to counsel, whether it's professional or it's informal. Knowing that we're not alone in something, I think, is critical to weathering the storms in our life and coming out on the other side in a healthy, sort of balanced way.
Yeah, I love that. Patrice, what about for yourself? I mean, in the middle of everything that goes on in the world, how comforting is it for you to know that you don't have to go through things alone, and that just like others can offer you a helping hand, that we sometimes are in a position to do that for others too?
Yeah, I think that's the best that we can do, is to extend a helping hand to people in need. And, I think I mentioned to you and Rodney that one of the things that I've been preoccupied with just in the past 10 days or so is that my late husband, who was from Afghanistan, I met him here in New York many years ago. He died after we had been together 23 years. A lovely person. Anyway, I got a message, I think it was from Facebook Messenger maybe, from his nephew, and I didn't even know his nephew until I got that appeal from him, saying that he was one of the Afghans who were trying to desperately flee from the Taliban in Kabul, because he had been working as a civil engineer for the past 12 years for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and for World Bank. And, you know, the Taliban had been to his house 3 times looking for him. So he was desperate to get a special immigrant visa, the SIV visas that we keep hearing about that are available to Afghans who supported Americans in Afghanistan, and he is eligible for that. And so it's a mad rush to try to get one of the supervisors he had worked with to write a letter of recommendation for him, which is necessary to complete the SIV program. So finally, after the third try, the third person that we reached out to, this wonderful man responded. I actually caught him. I called him. He lives in the U.S., but he was traveling. He was at the Paris airport on his way to the Congo to work on a project, and I explained to him the urgency of him please writing a letter of recommendation for my nephew. And he was very gracious. He understood the urgency, and in fact, many people had been reaching out to him. So he, dropped everything and wrote the letter at the airport and sent it to, where we asked him to email it. So just, extending a helping hand, as I did to my late husband's nephew, and as this stranger who once worked with my late husband's nephew was willing to go that extra mile and write that letter. It made all the difference in the world. And I'm communicating with my nephew. Just right now we're in a holding pattern because,
right.
The U.S. has already evacuated the people that they could by the August 31st deadline. And now hopefully they're going to continue this process from Doha, where the embassy personnel have been relocated to. So I'm just trying to not get too flipped out, trying to keep my nephew from flipping out, and just
right.
Let's just focus on doing what we need to do and asking for everybody's prayers and support, and not trying to get too far ahead of ourselves. Just focus on what we need to do today to move this forward. Just help,
yeah.
right?
Well,
that's what I'm doing.
It's powerful, Patrice, and you never know the connections, right, that are there. A lot of times, I think what happens is we hear stories on the news and we think, oh, that's so far away, and not realizing how
right.
close those connections are to us, for sure. And I appreciate that. Patrice, is there anything for the audience that, from what you've been hearing, for those that are trying to get out of Afghanistan, is there anything that the audience should know that they can do to be a part of that?
Well, I was just looking, because I was so focused on the trying to get that SIV application submitted, but there are a lot of groups that are trying to support people in Afghanistan now. UNICEF seems to have a major effort going, so anyone can go to unicef.org and, right on the homepage, there's support Afghan children and families. And there are a lot of different rescue groups that have emerged, people wanting to do something. So I don't know any of them closely. I used to sit on the board of the U.S. Fund for UNICEF, so I know the great work that they have been doing and continue to do. So, that seems to be a great organization.
Awesome. Rodney, what about yourself? I know you've been busy as well. What caught your attention this week you wanted to share?
Well, this week I've just been thinking a lot about the role of the arts in healing. I think I wear a lot of hats in my life, but one of the most important ones that I wear is as an arts educator. I've been an arts educator for many years, and most of my career, in fact, my entire career, has really been spent mostly on arts education as it relates to young people, and adults to a lesser extent, but mostly school age children. But I've been giving a lot of thought recently to the work that some organizations are doing with our senior population, and the idea that senior citizens have just as much interest and vitality when it comes to arts education. And so there is an emerging field called creative aging, this idea that as people get older, they don't, maybe certain things diminish, maybe people don't hear like they used to or see like they used to or have the same energy levels as they used to, but their creativity does not diminish. Their desire to make art, to engage in creative projects does not diminish. And in fact, in many ways, the experience of life can make artistic and creative projects even more satisfying, both for them and those around them. And so there's a lot of great organizations doing really good work. And I think about what happens when, as people get older, particularly as they, maybe they've raised families, maybe they've retired from their careers, and then there's a question of like, what next? And so there's some really interesting groups that are looking at how do we support our senior citizens with creative outlets. And some really interesting research has shown up in this area of creative aging. And what they found is that really good creative aging programs sort of have 5 characteristics. And, one of them is that they're designed to express the needs and interests of older adults, allowing them to build new skills. They're also led by competent teaching artists, so people who are actually working in the field and then bringing their expertise to our senior citizens. They're hands-on, they're sequential, so good programs don't just talk to people about art, they actually get people involved in art making. They also provide social interaction and engagement, whether in person or virtually. It's really about not isolating and really finding those social connections. And then they provide an opportunity for people to actually display what they've done in some kind of a culmination and share that with the community. And so there's a wonderful organization called the Touchstone Center for Collaborative Inquiry, and they did an evaluation of hundreds of these really great creative aging programs, and it was funded by Aroha Philanthropies. And they found a really interesting statistic. They found that 75% of participants in creative aging programs increased mental engagement, 68% of them formed new or stronger relationships, and 55% of them said that the experience encouraged them to participate in other community activities. And so for anybody who's listening to this, if there's a loved one, who you feel is getting up there and maybe isn't, is finding less joy, right, in the fact that they're entering this new wonderful phase of life. Maybe there's a way to connect that person with a local museum, a local music program, a local school, because more and more cities are taking on this idea of creative aging, and it's actually a growing field, and I'm fascinated to see how these things will grow in the future. And so that kind of caught my attention this week.
I'll tell you, the arts are so powerful, and I love that and the connection to how they're helping to make a difference. It will come as no surprise to our regular listening audience that it is a book that caught my attention for this week, which is connected to a person. So Catherine Klatzker, I had never heard of her before. She reached out to me by email. She had heard another interview that I had done with someone who was living with multiple personality disorder, MPD. She also has MPD, has alters, and she has written her story in a book called You Will Never Be Normal. So I told her to send me the book, read the book, loved the book. I then had a chance to interview her. And the thing I wanted to mention about Catherine's story, she dealt with some horrific abuse and trauma in her life. Unfortunate, but unfortunately, too, it is not too uncommon these days for us to hear about, one's own loved ones being their abusers. And she, in her case, unfortunately, was her father. And to protect herself, she developed these alters, these personalities that kind of were there to shield her from it. And so it was not until her adulthood that something triggered the memories, and she started to feel these parts, as she calls them, being undone. And one of the things that really struck me about her story is she talks a lot about her parts. And I thought that was so interesting because I think all of us kind of have these parts of ourselves, some that are more known to others than other parts may be, but how at the end she came to realize that, yes, she will never be normal, but nobody is. There is no such thing as normal. And how she was able to find peace in that fact. And I just love that message because I've never thought I was normal. It's good to not be alone in this. But it is a wonderful book, and so I told her I was so proud of her to have the courage to share, because things like this are not easy to talk about. She talks about in the book people thinking she was crazy. What are you talking about? You have other people in your body, and I mean, it's, it is not something that is talked about enough. I think there's someone here in my home state of Mississippi I've interviewed and talked with who also has MPD, and she's been very open about her own journey, and so I think it's something that needs to have the attention brought to it, and I think a book like this can help to do it. Again, it's You Will Never Be Normal by Catherine Klatzker, and it's available now through our friends at Amazon.com, and that's what I wanted to share. If you're not normal, it's okay. Well, no one is normal.
You are correct.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
That's really great, Cyrus. I'm glad you mentioned that. I just feel we have to begin to push back against this idea of normal, as if there is a golden standard.
Right.
I think we have, people are dealing with different things. And it's good and brave for people to step up and name what their challenges are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, too, just like we talked about here, and it's interesting it coming full circle, that they're not alone in it. And I think that's the thing, that she's been able to, since she told her story, to meet other people who have felt the exact same way. And I think that is where the power comes. There really is that strength in numbers. And so we'd love to hear from you, our audience, for one, what's helping you to keep your joy in the storm, but also, how do you know you're not normal? We would love to know what your thoughts are about what makes you unique and who you are and how you're okay with that. I think all of us have to love our parts. I think that's why I love that, the way that she phrases that. We have to love our parts, and our parts are unique and special, and they all matter. And I think that's one of the things that is so important. Rodney, Patrice, it is always great to be able to come back together with you guys. Excited about being with you all again. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Joy, Love, and Abundance. Until next time, we hope that you all will be able to find some joy, love, and abundance in your own life and spread that to others. You all take care, and we will talk with you all soon.